I'd start by saying cholesterol has a pretty bad press, but without cholesterol, 5 of the major steroid hormones would not be made. And those are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, and aldosterone. The first 4 of those are critically important in our general daily health, but also in terms of menopause. Menopause affects men and women, and also nowadays people who are transitioning both ways. It's not one thing. I think we have to look at the menopause as a phase of life. And it doesn't start or end, it transitions. So premenopause is when, and I'm talking mainly about women now, your estrogen levels start to decline. It's unpredictable. It leads to a lot of both physical and psychological symptoms, and it can last for several years. You then enter what is known as the menopause, but you can't say when you are in the menopause. You can only look back, because the menopause is confirmed after you have not had a period for 12 months. You then go on to postmenopause, which is the rest of your life. The thing is, you can still have the perimenopausal symptoms. So here we are in postmenopause, which goes, you know, we say the average age of, let me just go back a slide, apologies. The average age of menopause is 52. The average age for a woman now in this country is 84. So you are going to be postmenopausal for a good 32 years. For a number of those early years, you can still get symptoms such as hot flushes. And indeed, we referred a woman a month ago who was 72 and was still getting up to 20 hot flushes a day. And she'd been having those for the past 20 years. There was a telephone consultation with her from the hospital, and in Sheffield, certainly, there is a specialist menopause clinic, and it was suggested that this 72-year-old woman was started on an estrogen gel to try and control her symptoms. The only issue with that is the manufacturers do not recommend HRT past the age of 65. But she was so distraught by her symptoms that she wanted to take a risk and have it off license. So there are 4 types of estrogen. I'm sorry, I don't want to give you a biology lesson, but I'm going to. There's 4 types of estrogen. The main one is estradiol. It's produced by the ovaries from the time of your first period to the time of your last period. It only stops being produced if you're pregnant, and then you have this hormone, estradiol, which is produced by the placenta. The 4th estrogen is also produced in pregnancy, but the important one is this one, estrone, which is produced after the menopause. Now, estrone is produced not by the ovaries, but it's produced all over your body by the liver, pancreas, bone, adrenal glands, skin, brain, and fat tissue. And it converts androgens, which is testosterone, into estrogen via an enzyme. Critically importantly, the other source of estrone is your diet. And the breakdown of dietary estrogen is controlled by the bacteria in your gut. Estradiol, produced by your ovaries, circulates in your blood and has the impact that you would want estrogens to have all over the body. Estrone is produced locally in tissue and acts locally. So you're getting your hormone load in a completely different way. In the UK, the average age for menopause is 51. 1 in 100 women will experience the menopause under the age of 40. 1.5 million women in the UK experience symptoms which usually last for 4 years, but can last up to 12. And 50%, and this is really sad for me as a health professional, 50% of women will never see a health professional, even though they're incredibly symptomatic. A lot of women talk to their friends or their mums about their symptoms, and often the sort of consensus is there's nothing that we can use, it's just a part of life, you should just get on with it. As I said, premature menopause before the age of 40 can have really significant effects on a woman's general health, and it impacts on something called her morbidity. That's the illness that she will experience between the age of 40 and the time of her death. Early menopause starts before 45. The other interesting thing is that different races experience a different average time of menopause. So in African American women, it's at an earlier age. Caucasian women, you can see here, a fewer percentage have an early menopause, hardly any Japanese women. And that may be because of the phytoestrogen, soya-based products that they eat. These are the typical features of being perimenopausal. Hot flushes, and this is where I said I'd talk to you about Lisa. A bit unfair of me. Lisa ran a very big occupational health company, and she was working about 16 hours a day on average. At around about the time she started going through the perimenopause. And when it started, we thought it was stress related and overwork and poor sleep. It then became apparent when she was having probably between 10 and 15 hot flushes a day, and would be in a board meeting and have a handheld fan to try and cool her down, that something else was going on. It also impacted on her sleep, and it impacted on her concentration. I won't discuss that bit. The other thing it impacted on is me, because when you sleep with someone who's having insomnia and hot flushes, you don't sleep either. And she used to work away 2 or 3 nights a week, and I would actually quite look forwards to the times when she wasn't at home, because I would be able to get a night's sleep. After about 9 months, we decided that we had to do something for her. So she went to her GP and was prescribed some HRT. We're going to talk about HRT in a moment. But the other thing that we did at that time is change our diet. And we also looked at the impact of the microbiome on her well-being. And we looked very critically at the microbiome and tried to make significant dietary and health supplement changes. Menopausal symptoms do affect your home life and your social life and your work life, because if you can't concentrate and you have insomnia, you can't function properly at work. And if you're working in a large organization, or even in any organization, and you can't concentrate, other people may think there is something wrong with you. And if you're one of those people who don't talk about your menopausal symptoms, they can't help you. Half of women reported that their sex life was affected. Sexual health is as important as physical health. If your libido is reduced and you're knackered and you have vaginal dryness, it can impact you and your partner. But the thing is, there is treatment for it. But if you're reluctant to ask for treatment, you're stuck, and you may be stuck in that situation for a number of years. It's also at a time of your life where your children have grown up and may be leaving home. Your relationship is in a different phase because you're both getting a bit older. The other thing that tends to happen at around the time that both men and women are going through the menopause is that their parents are getting older and more dependent. So life is suddenly very stretched. Yet all of these things, the flushes, the sleep problems, the memory problems, joint aching, sexual dysfunction, are suddenly coming to the fore when you've never had them before. Women's response to the menopause are low mood, sometimes leading to depression, forgetfulness, brain fog. You can be embarrassed, anxious, fearful. You can't cope with everything that's happening at home, with the family, with work. And it has a huge impact on your personal and social life. A couple of people decided we need to try and score menopausal symptoms. So Kupperman, who was a man, did the first, let me go back.
At least with the Bundesliga, we're guaranteed Bundesliga.
Kupperman did the first index, which looked at vasomotor symptoms, flushes, paresthesia, which is numbness and tingling, sleep disturbance, nervousness, feeling of melancholy. This was done in the 60s. Vertigo, weakness, joint pain, headaches, palpitations, often linked to flushes. Formication is actually itching. That's not a misspelling. And he scored it. You'll have noticed he left out something really, really important on there, which is highlighted in the next index, which is the modified menopause rating scale, which is probably a much better scale because this deals with hot flushes and sweating, palpitations, sleep problems, joint discomfort, depressed mood, irritability, anxiety, exhaustion. The thing Kupperman missed, which is incredibly important, is the sexual problems, the bladder problems, and vaginal dryness. These three, we have now started seeing far more people with in surgery because they are all treatable. If you can treat the flushing and the insomnia, a lot of these problems, the mood disturbance, the irritability, the anxiety, and the utter exhaustion that some women feel as they're transitioning through the menopause, can be sorted. These are very typical symptoms of the menopause. And if any of you are unfortunate enough to be in this process in your life, you will look at those, and I don't need to go through them, but I'm going to leave that slide on there. And you think, this actually was not happening to me 2, 3, 5 years ago. And if you're living through it with no treatment because you don't know where to turn, it is devastating. Here's a new term probably for quite a few of you. You may have heard of the microbiome. You probably have not heard of the estrobolome. This relates specifically to those bacteria which live in your gut and are capable of breaking down conjugated estrogen. Estrogen, as we already know, comes in many forms. Some produced by the body, is excreted by the gallbladder into the gut, and the microbes in your gut then break it down into a usable type of estrogen. Dietary estrogen in the form of phytoestrogens are also broken down in the gut. So gut health is incredibly important in regulating your menopausal symptoms. Gut dysbiosis relates to a time when your gut bacteria are not optimal. And that can be because you're so stressed you've forgotten to eat properly. So your diet becomes mainly reliant on processed foods. You're eating more sugar than you should do. You're drinking more alcohol. You're exercising less. You're gaining weight. You aren't having enough fiber. Certainly a lot of people in the UK don't have enough fermented foods, things like kefir or kimchi or sauerkraut. And when you have gut dysbiosis and your estrogen isn't functioning as it should do, because estrogen has a huge impact on a lot of bodily functions. It has an impact on your cardiovascular well-being. It has an impact on the way that you store fat. It has a huge impact on a woman's liability to get osteoporosis. And that's why levels of osteoporosis rise after the menopause. Before you go through menopause, obviously it can impact on endometriosis, which is where you get uterine tissue in other sites other than the uterus. It will impact on polycystic ovarian syndrome. And understandably, all of those tissues which depend on estrogens, like the breast, the lining of your uterus, your cervix, and your ovary. I said I wasn't going to give you a biology lecture, but this is a quick one. So here's your gut. This is the small intestine. So we've said that conjugated estrogens can come through the bile duct into the bowel. Conjugated estrogen. Phytoestrogens are the estrogens that you eat. This hormone is produced by your microbiome, by the bacteria in your gut. And without a good, healthy gut microbiome, you cannot break down these forms of estrogen into the type of estrogen that your body can use. So what happens in your gut are the phytoestrogen and the conjugated estrogen. Gut bacteria break it down. It's absorbed into your gut, enters your bloodstream. It then goes to sites around your body, be it bone, breast, in this case, vagina, goes to your vaginal epithelium, where the active metabolites, these two, go into estrogen receptors. And this is where they exert their effect through gene expression, and you have a healthy vaginal lining. What happens when you are going through the menopause or are postmenopausal is there is not enough estrogen unless you've done something about it, and you get a condition called atrophic vaginitis, where the vaginal wall becomes very thin and dry. So we've mentioned gut dysbiosis, and we've mentioned the estrobolome. When the estrobolome isn't functioning, all of these things happen. You can get endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and endometrial hyperplasia, obesity and metabolic syndrome, cancer, not only of the lining of the womb, but of the breast, and interestingly, the stomach. And estrogen dysfunction has a major, major impact on brain function. All of these are clinical papers, and I can reference you to a paper on estrogen gut microbiome access and its implications, which is quite an easy read, and it may interest you, and I'll give you the link to that at the end of the talk. Menopause and mental health. It really is linked to your physical well-being. It doesn't exist in isolation. And we've already said the menopause happens at that time when you're going through a lot of change, both social and physical. Does a depressed mood cause the menopause, or does menopause cause depressed mood? It's not possible to say. But one of the things that happens when you're stressed is that cortisol, which is one of those hormones, you remember, that was produced by cholesterol, is impacted. And the thing is, when you're menopausal and you're no longer producing estrogen from your ovaries, you need to try and produce estrogen from cortisol, which may be one of the reasons that women do get stressed around the time of menopause, because your body is crying out for estrogen, and the fastest way it can produce it is by producing a stress hormone, which it can then break down. HRT. HRT is probably a taboo subject, but it's one we must talk about because it's a very, very good source of hormone replacement. We're going to go through this in some detail, and if you bear with me for 5 minutes while I do. So, what does HRT do? It replaces estrogen lost in the menopause. It definitely improves things like hot flushes, vaginal dryness, sleep disturbance. It helps with osteoporosis. It does have side effects in the form of breast tenderness, leg cramps, nausea, bloating, irritability, and depression. Studies have shown an increased link to cancer. Males can take, remember there's the male menopause, they can take patches or have testosterone gels. There are other forms of treatment for HRT, more natural forms. Currently, in the British National Formulary, there are over 50 different types of HRT. There are tablets, patches, gels. There's IUDs, which contain progestogen. There's even estrogen implants. There is no right or wrong with any of them. But what's happening more and more now amongst GPs who are interested is that they are prescribing something called bioidentical HRT, which tends to be the patches and gels. And it's also something called micronized progestogen, which is a much more similar progestogen to that naturally produced by the body. Historically, manufacturers used to make HRT from the urine of pregnant horses. It was one of the most widely prescribed HRTs. It was called Premarin. There was another form of it called Prempac-C, and in the 90s, they were probably the most widely prescribed forms of HRT. Not surprisingly, given the nature of their manufacture and production, women used to get side effects. Now, as you know, I've been a GP for 30 years. I was a partner in the 90s. And in the 90s, women who were in their mid-40s would come to the GP and say, I know I'm going to go through the menopause. I want to have HRT because it's going to keep me young. Makes my skin great, makes my hair great. I will maintain my libido. Everything's going to be fantastic. And to be honest with you, at the time, we all thought as GPs, HRT was the panacea for youth. Things changed fairly dramatically. There were two studies that led to the change. The Women's Health Initiative in 1991 looked at 162,000 women. The thing is that these women were in their 60s, so they were 10 years after the menopause, and they were actually given HRT to look at the potential benefit of HRT on cardiovascular health. The other group of women was what was called the UK-based Million Women study. That ran between 1996 and 2001. They looked at 1.3 million women who had actually attended for breast screening and asked them a series of questions about their height, their diet, their weight, their smoking history, whether they took HRT. Both of these studies produced data at around about the same time in 2002. And this is what the data said. HRT can double the risk of breast cancer. So the Daily Mail, which loves to sensationalize things, and the BBC. Within a month, virtually all women in the UK stopped taking HRT. The studies did show an increase in HRT. And I just want you to look at this. HRT can double the risk of breast cancer. That's terrifying. And if I was taking HRT, I would have stopped it. The problem is the sensationalization of the data destroyed the lives of a cohort of women for about 10 years. Because between 2002 and around about 2012, when the studies were refuted, a whole group of women took nothing for their menopause. This is the current data from the British National Formulary. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting all these squiggly lines. So, breast cancer. If a woman is not taking HRT, the background incidence is in 1,000 women, 30 over a 10-year period would get breast cancer. For those women taking combined HRT, there would actually be an additional 36. 36 out of 1,000 is 0.36%. So yes, there are twice the number in terms of relative risk, but the absolute risk, which is the number per 1,000, is still very small. And if those women have only used HRT for 5 years, and the recommendation now is that you use HRT for the shortest possible period to control your symptoms, the risk is 0.09%. It was also thought in the 2002 time that HRT massively increased your risk of having a clot. it does increase your risk of having a clot, but 10 women out of every 1,000 would have one, which equally means that 990 wouldn't. Data is great. It depends on the way that you look at data, and it depends on the way that data is interpreted. Most importantly, data should not be used to sell newspapers. You can tell I feel quite passionately about that, can't you? Right, phytoestrogens. These are estrogens that you eat. There's two major classes. There's isoflavones, which are soybeans, so soy, tofu, etc. And there's lignans, so flax seeds, whole grains, legumes, fruit and veg. Healthy food contains phytoestrogens, which can help your estrogen levels both in the peri and post-menopause. And if you remember, if you eat these types of foods, your gut microbiome will be able to break down the phytoestrogen for you to utilize as another source of estrogen. Other than HRT, there are some natural measures you can take. We mentioned how poor your diet can be in terms of processed foods and sugars. So if you reduce fat, try and not get fat, reduce the amount of salt that you eat, increase your calcium and vitamin D, that will definitely help. A number of dietary supplements have been used over the years, and they all have the proponents: cohosh, sage, red clover, ginseng, evening primrose oil, licorice, red raspberry, St. John's wort, lemon balm, fennel. All of them have their advocates. And if you go online, there will be people who say, this is the only thing that works. Ignore the medical profession. It's wonderful. Just remember that some of these products can interact with other medicines, and some of them in their own right can cause really quite significant side effects, like liver toxicity and vaginal bleeding. If you're going to take one of these types of supplement, please make sure that it has a traditional herbal registration certificate. Exercise is a great treatment for the menopause. Helps reduce fat, reduces stress. Try not to drink too much alcohol, particularly at the moment. A lot of people, because they're at home and the wine's there in the fridge and you're thinking, well, it's 5 o'clock, just have a little drink. It can suddenly become a habit which is hard to break. Remember other complementary therapies like acupuncture, aromatherapy, homeopathy. Yoga is fantastic, as is reflexology. Menopause isn't just one thing. It's a combination of things happening at the same time, which produces an individual effect in you. If you look after your gut will be able to do everything it can to enable the estrogens you need into your body. So increase prebiotics such as inulin, eat more fiber, increase probiotics, try and take some fermented foods, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut. You can make them all at home. Make sure that your diet is rich in vitamins, minerals, and trace elements. Food nowadays doesn't contain those vital ingredients that we think it does, and it can definitely help to take a supplement. Try and maintain your brain well-being. We've already been through the things to do. Good sleep hygiene. If you are having hot flushes, your sleep will be impacted, as will your partner's. Try and take steps which will help sleep. And those simple steps are cut back on caffeine, cut back on using electronic devices just before bed. Try and have a warm, milky drink. Have a hot bath before going to bed. They will all definitely help you. Recent research show that certain probiotics will help conditions such as endometriosis, osteoporosis, and it's shown that broad spectrum lactobacillus can help have an anti-carcinogenic effect on breast tissue, and it also normalizes hormones in polycystic ovarian syndrome. I hope that wasn't too technical, and I hope you learnt something from that. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for giving me an hour of your time tonight. Cheers.
Teri, Rav, you're handing over to Teri, aren't you now? So
I am
if
handing
you can
over. I'm going to
stop sharing and pass over to
Over to you, Teri.
Teri, you're just on mute at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Rav. I've heard that talk a few times, but I made quite a few notes as well. So for those of you that are thinking, right, where do I start then? You know, I've got quite a few of those symptoms, or I'm post-menopause, but I'm still wanting to help myself in different areas. I would like you to really encourage you to read more about gut health, the microbiome, and the effect that that has on our production of all kinds of different hormones. And I'm only on for just a few minutes tonight, but it's to nudge you into that area. And whoever invited you on the call tonight can definitely give you lots more information. But just a couple of slides to share with you, just to sort of share the point of how gut health has such an influence, particularly on our hormones. So there's a huge connection. We know that the gut not only produces hormones, but has an influence on many, many ways that hormones are utilized throughout the body. And just a couple of things like serotonin, the happy hormone. We had lots of that last week, didn't we, with all the sunshine? May not be feeling quite so happy at the moment. But you know, the serotonin, the hormone that makes us happy, is produced in the gut, as is GABA, which is the calming hormone that really helps the brain relax. And anyone who's very anxious often hasn't got enough of this hormone. Very, very important. Deep sleep, melatonin, Rav mentioned that. And this is the hormone that helps us sleep and help us recover and rejuvenate while we're sleeping. But again, that's produced by gut health, good gut health. And fertility. We are talking a lot about estrogen and hormones in this area. And again, produced in the gut, but also influenced as to how they are around the body by good gut health. Now, anyone thinking about dealing with hormonal issues, really their top priority should be looking at your gut health and improving it. That's the core. And then after that, if there are still little niggles and things, certainly by improving our diet, cutting down on refined sugars, and there's lots of hidden sugar these days, can really, really help with our hormonal health. And also not to forget thyroid issues. The thyroid is very much affected by the gut microbiome. And in fact, we need really good gut bacteria to help balance not just estrogen, but the hormones that affect the thyroid. So this is an area, a huge area, and both Rav and I have met this particular chap on the screen, Dr. Matt Tripp. He's now retired, but he is quite a renowned microbiologist, and he's done a lot of human trials and research into the gut microbiome and our health in general. And he's the guy who's behind some scientific products, validated products, that can really help you on your journey to resetting your gut and giving you lots and lots of good things that we know that the gut, well, we know scientifically really help feed the gut. Things like good quality protein, fiber, pre and probiotics, things like zinc, and certainly things like L-glutamine, for example, which helps repair that gut wall that Rav was mentioning. And I think it's important to remember this leaky gut, where these toxins leak into our bloodstream. This reduces the amount of estrogen and reduces the amount of hormones that our body can make. So by really helping with gut health, it can help all of these processes. So our 21-day program, I know there's quite a few people on the call who've already done this, is not just been thrown together. It's had human clinical trials, and we've had it in the UK for over 3 years now. It's something that I've done a couple of times. I'm currently doing it again. And this is something that can really reset the purification program that your body can really start to improve with once it's been done. So this is it, 21-day program. It's healthy food, but with supplements that we know can really help reset gut health. It's going to be featured on Channel 4 very soon because they saw and heard about our 21-day gut program, and they have a program coming out very shortly about different solutions to help reset gut health. In fact, I can see actually Lisa in the chat column. Hi Lisa, thanks for that, because I know you finished the 21-day program just a week or two ago. And in fact, Lisa called me, if you don't mind me mentioning, Lisa, you called me about 6 weeks ago, and previously in my a few years ago, I used to recommend things like black cohosh, phytoestrogens with reasonable success. I think of them these days more as a plaster rather than the actual thing that can really get to the root cause. And Lisa rang me because I've known her for many years, probably about 20 years, and she said, you know, she's having some problems going through the menopause. What would I recommend? And I said, well, I could recommend herbs that you can go and get from a good health food shop, etc. But you know what? If you really want to get to the cause of your menopausal issues, you really need to work on your gut. And we have a 21-day program. And I think that's where you should start. And then we can continue improving your health. We did a lifestyle analysis and you know, we can sort of work on it from there. And you can see Lisa's testimony in the chat box if you haven't seen it already. Along with not just a program of supplements and changing your diet, particularly from a sugar point of view, we give daily encouragement and information, menu suggestions. And if you'd like, you can go on a support group, like a WhatsApp group, and it's really motivating. As I said, I'm sort of one of the guinea pigs this week. We started yesterday, and I look forward to my little message, Lisa. Thank you very much every morning. It's nice being on the receiving end, and it is really motivating to know that someone's thinking about you and keeping you on sorry, I'm just reading someone who's written a message. I can't understand a word. Is that a foreign language? But if you are interested after this talk, that was excellent, thank you, Rav, and knowing a little bit more about this process and how it all works and what it will do for you, then just speak to someone, a person who's invited you along to the talk this evening. So that's the end of my little chat, Lisa, and I'm going to hand back to you. I think you're waiting in the wings there.
I've been very busy because it's been a lot of chat and private messages. So Rav needs to do that talk again because I haven't actually listened to him. I've been so busy kind of responding to people, but thank you.